Julia types away on her laptop during the flight to the Cook Islands, while John relaxes with a drink. When they land, friendly locals greet them with smiles. William, Julia's business partner, meets them at the airport and drives them to their hotel. On the way, Julia brings up something she heard that some locals might not be happy about their project. William brushes it off, saying there's nothing to worry about. At the hotel, a cheerful receptionist named Anita checks them in. Once in their room, John steps out onto the balcony. He sees a wedding taking place below and smiles, reminded that this trip was meant to be their long-delayed honeymoon. He jokes about making the most of the time together. But Julia stays focused on her work. When John asks her to join him for a swim, she says she'll come later. As night comes, William tells Julia that a boat will take her to another island early the next morning. Later, Anita comes over and asks John to join the dancing. He hesitates, but when Julia gives him a small nod, he agrees and joins in. A dancer also reaches out to Julia. At first, she holds back, but he gently pulls her onto the dance floor. The next morning, Julia calls her father Trevor and tells him she's close to closing a deal. She explains she'll soon visit the island they're considering. Trevor scolds her lightly, saying John should be more involved. Thinking of this, Julia asks her half-awake husband if he signed the insurance papers. John nods, and Trevor ends the call, satisfied. As Julia gets ready to leave, John tells her he'll miss her. She finally notices how alone he feels and wonders if she should wait for a plane instead, so they can go together. But John encourages her to take the boat, finish her work, and then enjoy their time off. Julia agrees and kisses him goodbye. She arrives at the dock, where William introduces her to the boat's captain. As the captain's assistant, Sid, helps with Julia's things, William tells her he'll be back to pick her up in the morning. While Julia enjoys the quiet boat ride, two officers, Sergeants Roy and Briggs, arrive at the hotel. They show Anita, the receptionist, a photo of someone they're trying to find. She quickly says she doesn't recognize him, but her answer seems a bit too fast. Roy gently asks her to take another look. Still, Anita says she hasn't seen the man. The sergeants leave their contact information and ask her to call if anything comes up. Back on the boat, Sid shows the captain a message about a storm. The captain stays calm and tells Julia that everything will be fine. Meanwhile, at the hotel, John walks up to the front desk and compliments Anita on the art displayed there. He asks if she can show him some special places around the island. At first, Anita seems unsure, but John explains that he's trying to do something thoughtful. He says he and his wife have been married for a long time, but they've barely had time together. This trip is meant to be their long-delayed honeymoon. Understanding this, Anita agrees to help. She takes John to the beach, hoping he might find something meaningful to surprise his wife. They also visit the local museum, where Anita shares stories about the island's past. She gently takes his hand to guide him through the exhibits. Out at sea, Julia starts to feel unwell. The captain notices and suggests she rest in the cabin for a while. Later, Anita brings John to a small jewelry shop where they look at black pearls. That night, out at sea, Julia wakes to strong winds and rough waves shaking the boat. The storm is in full force, and the captain is nowhere to be found. Sid quickly throws her a life jacket and urges her out of the cabin. Julia hesitates, but Sid pushes her into the water before jumping in after her. The next morning, Julia wakes up alone on a quiet, unknown island. Scared and confused, she calls out, looking for help. Soon, Sid walks out from the trees carrying coconuts. Relieved, Julia hugs him, but he stays still and says nothing. She asks him many questions, but he doesn't reply, and she starts to think he can't speak. Then, without warning, Sid tells her to sit and drink. Julia's unsure at first, but thirst wins, and she drinks the coconut juice. Afterward, Sid heads back into the trees, gathering materials to build a shelter. It becomes clear to Julia they might be stuck here for a while. Somewhere else, John gets a phone call. He listens carefully and responds, taking in what he's been told. On the island, Julia keeps asking Sid questions and giving him orders, which starts to bother him. She doubts they even need a shelter, sure that someone will find them soon. Deciding to wait by the shore in case a boat comes by, she leaves Sid to work alone. Time slips by. No one arrives. Realizing help may not arrive, Julia returns to Sid and finds that he's already finished building a shelter. But when she takes a look, she says it's not good enough and refuses to stay in it. Sid then calmly tells her it wasn't built for both of them, only for himself. Meanwhile, back at the resort, William and Anita inform John that Julia's boat never reached its destination. The next morning, Anita goes with him to the police station. There, an officer explains that although Julia hasn't been found yet, there's still hope they've rescued others lost at sea for days. Trying to stay strong, John calls Julia's father with the news. That night, on the island, Julia wakes up suddenly, feeling something strange crawling under her clothes. She calls for Sid in a panic. He walks over calmly and checks what's wrong. Reaching under the fabric where she pointed, he pulls out a leech. Julia yells and swats it away in fear. On the third day, without any sign of Julia, her father Trevor calls John for an update. Sadly, John has no news to share. He urges Trevor not to travel due to his health and promises to keep searching. Trevor, however, doesn't seem fully convinced. Back on the island, Julia asks Sid what he plans to do next. He says he wants to figure out where they are and suggests they head deeper into the jungle. Julia refuses. She still believes someone will come looking for them. Sid, thinking otherwise, decides to climb to higher ground for a better view. He tells her to stay near the beach, but she quickly changes her mind, not wanting to be alone. She follows him, though she finds it hard to keep up. Julia tries to convince Sid to turn back, saying her husband is probably searching for her. Sid doesn't respond. When Julia starts complaining about being hungry, Sid cuts a piece of sugarcane and tells her to chew it. Though unsure, she follows his instructions. Elsewhere, Anita's worry grows. She finally tells John that Sid is her brother-in-law, the only family she has left on the island. She's not just worried for Julia, but for him too. John looks out over the island and quietly reassures her that they'll find both of them. Later, Julia and Sid reach the base of a mountain. Julia says she can't climb it in her clothes. Sid looks at her, then quickly tears a slit in her skirt to make it easier to move. Without saying much, he starts the climb, and she follows. After a long, tiring hike, they reach the top. Sid looks around and says they're far from everything. There's no sign of people or help nearby. Julia spots another island in the distance, but Sid tells her the waters are dangerous and full of sharks, so swimming there isn't safe. Feeling exhausted and hopeless, Julia lies down to rest. Sid goes off to search for food and comes back with some eggs which he eats raw. Julia watches, clearly uncomfortable. As the sun begins to set, Sid decides they need to head back to the beach. Julia groans, unhappy about climbing down again. On the way back, they find a waterfall. Sid tells her to fill up their containers while he looks for more supplies. Instead, Julia takes the chance to cool off in the water, enjoying the moment. When Sid returns and sees her, he gets frustrated, saying they don't have time to waste. Julia jokes that he's always serious. Then she asks him to hand her clothes. He tells her to come and get them herself, but when she refuses, he gives in and tosses them back to her. William and John meet with locals to explain their business plans, saying it will boost tourism and income. Some worry about the environment. William promises to protect it, but admits some bird habitats might be affected. A local man shows research saying the impact is bigger than planned. John disagrees and says the project will help the community. On the island, Julia hurts her ankle. Sid gently resets it, and though the pain makes Julia hit him, he stays calm. As night falls, Sid finds herbs to wrap her ankle. They decide to rest for the night. Julia feels cold, so Sid shares his warmth, helping her fall asleep. The next day, the sergeants learn the man they're after is Sid, who has just returned to the beach with Julia. That night, Julia struggles to sleep and moves close to Sid, who wakes suddenly from a nightmare. The next morning, Anita tells John the captain is found alive. On the island, Julia makes an SOS sign with coconuts and rocks. Sid says it won't help much. News spreads that the captain survived but thinks Julia and Sid likely didn't. Later, the tide washes away Julia's sign and she feels hopeless. Sid stays calm and gives her a homemade remedy. Julia thanks Sid, saying his wife was lucky. Sid says he was the lucky one, his wife died long ago. Sid then shares plans to build a raft, giving Julia new hope. That night, John tries to comfort Anita as she worries about her missing brother-in-law. They sit quietly, feeling the tension. The next morning, Trevor arrives in the Cook Islands, angry at John for not doing enough. John feels frustrated. On the island, Julia and Sid build a raft. Sid teaches her knot tying and fishing. He finds a black pearl and keeps it. Julia catches trash, and Sid explains how big companies harm nature. Julia feels uneasy. That evening, Julia enjoys the peaceful island and admits she's too busy to appreciate life. Sid gives her the pearl, and she smiles. They share a meal, sing, and dance by the fire. They kiss briefly but then pull away, unsure what it means. The next day, Anita sees John paying the captain and feels suspicious. John says it's to buy a new boat to search for Julia and Sid. On the island, Julia watches the waves and plans when to leave. They sail on a raft but spot a shark. Sid jumps in to distract it while Julia rows back. Julia finds Sid injured and helps sew his wound, but he stays distant. A week later, they find a suitcase with a flare gun and satellite phone. Julia calls John, but the battery dies before she finishes. John ignores the ringing phone but later hears Julia's voicemail and is surprised. Julia spots a boat and tells Sid to get the flare gun. Sid fires it to catch the boat's attention. The captain arrives by kayak but points a gun at them, warning Julia that Sid is wanted for a crime. Julia is confused but trusts Sid. The captain tries to shoot Julia, but Sid stops him. They fight until Julia knocks the captain out with a coconut. Julia helps Sid use the captain's kayak to reach the boat. Sid makes the captain's helper take them to the mainland. Sid uses the radio to call the Coast Guard, who hear the call and rush to the docks. News spreads about Julia and Sid, and reporters meet them at the docks. One says Sid is a doctor wanted for a crime. Anita greets Sid, but the sergeants arrest him. Julia is shocked and says the captain should be arrested instead. The sergeants insist Sid must face the law. Julia loses trust in Sid and runs to her father, with John comforting her. Anita watches, feeling unsure, as John kisses Julia in front of her. That night, Julia can't stop thinking about Sid. John gives her a necklace, but it only reminds her of Sid's gift. Julia admits she has feelings for Sid and apologizes. John holds her close. The next day, Julia asks her father to help get Sid out of jail, saying he saved her. Trevor has already hired a lawyer. A local man warns them their business plans will harm the environment and asks them to stop. Julia listens and asks her father to hear him out. At the same time, Anita sees John take a liquor bottle. He leads her to a room, says he needs to stay with Julia, then knocks Anita out and secretly poisons the bottle. He ties her up in a closet. Later, Julia decides not to sign the contract and urges her father to protect the island. Trevor is unsure at first, but agrees when he sees Julia's determination. Sid, now out on bail, can't stop thinking about Julia. Anita escapes and warns Sid that John planned to kill Julia and might try again. They agree to save her themselves. That evening, John offers Julia wine. Trevor toasts to his daughter's safety. Julia lifts her glass to drink, but Sid suddenly rushes in, warning her that her husband wants to harm her. Julia doesn't believe him, and John tells the guards to remove Sid. Taking the moment, Anita admits she ended her sister's suffering because she was very sick. Sid was protecting her. Anita then accuses John of trying to poison Julia. Julia still doubts this. To prove himself, Trevor gives Julia's glass to John and tells him to drink it. But when the time comes, he can't do it, showing he planned to poison her. With John defeated, Anita hits him in anger, while Julia walks away, upset and confused. The next day, Sid thinks about his time with Julia. Then, to his surprise, Julia comes to him, finally ready to accept that he is the one for her.
Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay connected with us.